please? I'm not blocking your road on purpose. Let me just move these. That was what Amara said to the tall man in the tailored suit when his convoy stopped in front of her yam stall, right in the middle of the village market at the hottest hour of the day. Her voice was respectful, careful. The way people speak to men who can change their lives without ever learning their names. It didn't matter. The men around him laughed anyway. Not loud at first, just small, sharp bursts like they had been waiting for permission. Then it spread. Traders, passers-by. Even people who had been ignored by the Mansikans earlier suddenly found courage in his presence. Amara did not laugh. She stood beside her overturned basket, chest rising and falling from the effort of lifting it moments before. Dust clung to the sweat on her arms. The front of her wrapper was smeared with dirt where she had tried to catch the falling yams. One cracked tuber lay split open near her foot, pale flesh exposed to the sun. She did not bend to pick it up. She did not step back either. She simply looked at him, not boldly, not submissively, just steadily as if trying to understand why a stranger would choose cruelty when indifference would have been easier. Behind him, black SUVs idled, engines vibrating like restrained animals. Security men shifted impatiently, ready to clear the road by force if ordered. Heat shimmered above the asphalt. The air smelled of dust, diesel and roasted corn from a nearby stall. The man glanced at the scattered yams, then at her body, his expression settling into mild amusement. So this, he said smoothly, is the obstacle that stopped an entire motorcade. More laughter. Amara's fingers tightened at her sides, but her voice remained low. I said I would move them, sir. He tilted his head, studying her as though she were something unusual he had discovered by accident. Take your time, he replied lightly. You don't look like you move very fast anyway. The laughter came harder now, open, unrestrained, eager. Still she did not cry. Instead, she swallowed once, lifted her chin just enough to meet his eyes, and spoke with a quiet firmness that did not match her trembling hands. If my father were alive, she said, you would not speak to me like that. Someone snorted. Another person clapped mockingly. Amara drew a slow breath. Then she said the words that would not leave his mind for days. If you knew whose daughter I am, you wouldn't be laughing. Hello friends, welcome to our story. Before we start, please like this video, share and subscribe. Also tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Is it United States, London, maybe Canada, Jamaica, South Africa or anywhere? We want to know. And tell us what you learned at the end of this video. There was a time when people did not laugh when Amara walked past. There was a time when her father's name alone could quiet a gathering. Older villagers still remembered it, though now they spoke of it the way people speak of a story that ended badly. With lowered voices. With pity. With a careful distance reserved for fallen greatness. Your father was once a big man, some would say, shaking their heads. Then they would add almost immediately, but life is strange. Amara had been too young to understand what they meant. What she remembered instead was rain. Not the gentle kind that makes the earth smell sweet, but the kind that pounds rooftops like fists. The day they buried him, the sky had opened as if it could not hold itself together. The ground turned to mud. The small crowd huddled beneath umbrellas and plastic sheets. Her aunt held her hand so tightly it hurt, as though afraid the storm might carry her away too. Before they closed the coffin, she had clung to the edge, her tears mixing with rainwater until she could no longer tell which was which. The night before he died, he had pulled her close and spoken in a voice that sounded older than she had ever heard. Never fight the world with anger, he told her. It will make you small. Stand straight. Even when you are alone. She did not understand then why his eyes looked like he was already saying goodbye. After his burial, the visitors stopped coming. Money disappeared quickly, first the savings, then the livestock, then anything that could be sold without leaving the house empty. School fees became impossible. The dreams he had spoken about for her faded into daily survival. By 16 she was working in the fields. By 20 she was carrying yam to market. People said her body grew large because she ate too much. They never saw the truth, that she often ate last and sometimes not at all. At night, when the house was quiet, she would open the small wooden box beneath her bed. Inside were a few old papers, a photograph she barely understood, and a fountain pen that no longer worked. Her father had told her never to throw them away. They matter, he had said simply. She did not know why. But she kept them, because they were all she had left of him. By the time the sun climbed high enough to bleach the sky white, the market had transformed from noisy to brutal. Heat pressed down like a physical weight. Tempers shortened. Bargaining turned sharp. Every sale felt like a small battle someone had to win. Amara arranged her yams in neat rows on a frayed mat, wiping sweat from her neck with the edge of her wrapper. She chose the largest tubers to display first, not because they were easier to sell but because people expected a woman her size to deal in abundance. If her stall looked small, they would laugh. If it looked too big, they would laugh anyway. A woman stopped in front of her, squinted at the yams, then at Amara. "You're selling these," she said, "or saving them for your dinner?" The women nearby chuckled. Amara forced a polite smile. "They're good yams, madam. Very fresh." "Fresh, yes," the woman replied dryly. "Safe from customers, apparently." She walked away without buying anything. Later, a group of schoolboys passed, whispering loudly enough to be heard. "If she sits on one, it will become pounded yam immediately." They howled with laughter as they ran off. Amara kept arranging her stall, fingers steady even as her ears burned. There was no correct version of herself here. Too quiet meant she was proud, too friendly meant she was desperate, too confident meant she was rude. Every path led back to ridicule. Near midday the local tax collector arrived, moving from stall to stall with a notebook tucked under his arm. He stopped in front of Amara and tapped the page with his pen. "You are behind again," he said flatly. "I will pay by evening," she replied softly. "Sales have been slow." He looked at her yams, then at her body, unimpressed. "Maybe if you talked less and worked more, business would improve." She nodded, though she had said almost nothing. After he left, her aunt leaned over from the neighboring stall, voice low and urgent. "Don't draw attention to yourself," the older woman warned. "Big people are coming to buy land around here. Anyone who causes trouble will suffer." Amara frowned. "Buy land?" "They say one powerful man wants everything, farms, houses, even the roadside plots." Amara's hand stilled on a yam. Her father's land lay just beyond the river. She said nothing, but something cold settled in her stomach. The convoy had not meant to stop in the market. It stopped because the road ahead simply vanished beneath a slow-moving wall of people, wheelbarrows, goats, and wooden carts piled high with produce. Drivers leaned on their horns. Security men stepped out immediately, voices sharp, hands already pushing bodies aside. "Move. Clear the road." Panic rippled outward. Traders scrambled to drag their goods away from the asphalt. Someone knocked over a basket of tomatoes. A child started crying. Dust rose in choking clouds as the line of vehicles inched forward. Amara tried to lift her yam basket out of the way, but exhaustion had crept into her bones. When she bent, her arms trembled violently. The basket shifted, slipped, and crashed to the ground. Huge tubers rolled in every direction, thudding against shoes, bumping into carts, scattering into the road like stubborn stones. A security man swore under his breath. "What is wrong with you people?" Before Amara could gather even one yam, the rear door of the lead SUV opened. The billionaire stepped out, adjusting his cuff as though he had all the time in the world. Up close, he looked even more unreal, perfectly composed, untouched by heat or dust, his shoes so clean they seemed almost disrespectful in that environment. Conversations died instantly. Even the crying child went quiet. His gaze moved from the stalled traffic, to the yams scattered across the road, and finally to Amara, kneeling in the dirt, trying to pull them back into a pile with shaking hands. He tilted his head slightly. "So this," he said calmly, "is what is holding up an entire highway." No one answered. A faint smile appeared, the kind that did not reach the eyes. "I didn't realize agriculture had become sedentary." A few people laughed uncertainly. Encouraged, he continued, voice smooth and light. "Although judging by the size of the merchandise, and the merchant, perhaps supply is not the issue." This time the laughter came faster. Louder. Relief mixed with cruelty. Some covered their mouths. Others stared openly at Amara as if seeing her for the first time. Her ears roared. Her hands froze around a yam coated in red dust. Slowly she stood. She did not shout. She did not plead. She simply looked at him, directly, steadily, in a way that made a few people nearby shift uncomfortably. "I am sorry for blocking your road," she said, voice quiet but clear. "It was not my intention." For a moment, something flickered in his expression, surprise perhaps that she sounded educated. It vanished almost immediately. He waved a dismissive hand toward the security men. "Clear this mess." Rough hands grabbed at her yams, tossing them aside instead of gathering them. One split open when it hit the pavement. Another rolled beneath a vehicle tire and cracked with a dull snap. Amara flinched but did not move forward. She knew better than to get in their way. When the path was finally open, the billionaire returned to his car without looking back. The convoy surged forward. As the lead vehicle passed her, the tire struck a shallow puddle left from morning washing water. Mud sprayed outward in a heavy arc and hit Amara full across the front of her body. Her wrapper, her blouse, her arms, even her face. The SUVs continued down the road, shrinking into the dust, leaving behind silence thick enough to choke on. For several seconds after the convoy disappeared, no one spoke. Amara stood exactly where she had been, mud dripping slowly from the edge of her chin onto the front of her blouse. The heat baked it into her skin almost instantly, turning the wet splash into a stiff, drying stain. Flies returned first, landing boldly on the exposed yam flesh and on the damp fabric clinging to her body. Then the whispers began. She should have moved faster. Why argue with people like that? Now see what she has caused for herself. No one offered to help. Kneeling slowly, she began gathering the damaged yams. Some were cracked open. Others were bruised beyond sale. Each one felt heavier than before, as if the humiliation itself had added weight. She wiped dirt away with trembling fingers, though she knew it would not change anything. A small boy hovered nearby watching. "Auntie," he said softly, "are you crying?" She paused, touched her cheek, and realized she hadn't noticed the tears at all. "I am fine," she answered automatically. He didn't look convinced. By the time the sun dipped lower, she had salvaged only a few tubers worth keeping. The rest lay in a sad, broken pile beside her mat. No customers came. No one wanted goods associated with disgrace. When the market began to thin, she wrapped the unsold yams in cloth and lifted the basket again. This time it felt impossibly heavy, though there was far less inside. The walk home stretched longer than usual. Shadows lengthened across the road. The evening breeze carried cooking smells from distant houses, onions frying, pepper soup simmering, sharp reminders of a hunger she had learned to ignore. Her stomach twisted painfully. She had not eaten since morning. At the bend near the river, she stopped beneath a crooked tree and set the basket down. For a moment she simply stood there, breathing, the quiet pressing in from all sides. From the fold of her wrapper, she pulled out the small photograph she always carried. The edges were worn soft from years of handling. Her father's face looked back at her, serious, calm, unyielding even in faded ink. A sudden, fierce urge rose in her chest to fling it into the bushes. To stop carrying a past that had brought her nothing but struggle. Her hand drew back, then stopped. Slowly, she pressed the photograph to her chest instead, shoulders shaking in silence. "What am I supposed to do?" she whispered into the empty road. The wind did not answer. Miles away from the village, inside a quiet, air-conditioned office high above the city, the man from the convoy sat alone at a polished desk that reflected the ceiling lights like still water. Files lay open before him. Maps, contracts, valuation reports, satellite images of farmland stretching across several districts. A digital screen displayed projected profits in neat columns, numbers so large they barely looked real. For him this was not land. It was expansion, efficiency, control. He turned a page with practiced ease. Acquisition Phase 3, the heading read. Most of the parcels had already been secured. Some owners had sold eagerly, dazzled by figures they had never imagined. Others had resisted briefly, then relented when local officials began making visits. A few had tried to negotiate for more money. None had lasted long. Except one. His pen stopped tapping. A single property near the river was marked in red. Not because of its size, it was modest compared to the others, but because of its refusal. Multiple offers rejected. Follow-up visits unsuccessful. Owner uncooperative. He frowned slightly and flipped to the attached notes. Female owner. Lives on site. Primary occupation, yam seller. No known political backing. No legal disputes pending. He leaned back, puzzled more than annoyed. Why refuse this? He murmured to the empty room. It made no strategic sense. The amount offered would lift an entire extended family out of poverty. Most people would sign immediately, grateful and relieved. He pressed the intercom. Send Mr. Adeyemi in. Minutes later, an older man entered. Careful posture, measured movements, eyes that had seen many seasons in the corporate world. He had worked for the company since its earliest days, long before luxury offices replaced cramped rented spaces. You asked for me, sir? The billionaire slid the file across the desk. This land near the river. Why is it still unresolved? Mr. Adeyemi adjusted his glasses and scanned the page. For a brief second, so brief most people would have missed it, something flickered across his face. Recognition. Then it was gone. The owner is stubborn, he said neutrally. Some villagers are attached to ancestral land. The billionaire studied him. Attached enough to refuse this price? Pause. Mr. Adeyemi cleared his throat softly. The surname is familiar. That is all. Familiar how? The older man hesitated as though weighing whether to say more. In the end he simply shook his head. Perhaps I am mistaken. It has been many years. The room fell quiet again. The billionaire closed the file slowly, but the unease remained, a faint disturbance he could not name. He disliked loose ends. Disliked things that did not fit the pattern. Outside the window, the city pulsed with life, unaware of a village far away where one woman still said no. He dismissed the feeling with a small exhale. Increase the offer, he said finally. Whatever it takes. Mr. Adeyemi nodded, though his expression carried a concern he did not voice. The letter arrived 3 days later, carried by a government vehicle that drew curious eyes long before it stopped in front of Amara's small compound. 2 men stepped out, one in an official-looking shirt with a badge clipped to his pocket, the other holding a slim black briefcase. They did not greet the neighbors. They did not remove their sunglasses. They walked straight to Amara's doorway and knocked with the firm rhythm of people accustomed to obedience. Her aunt opened first, wiping her hands on her wrapper. Yes. We are here on behalf of Coal Industries, the taller man said. We need to speak with Miss Amara. The name alone was enough to send a ripple through the small crowd that had already begun to gather outside the gate. Amara stepped forward. I am Amara. The man handed her a thick envelope. Inside were neatly printed documents, stamped pages, and a number written in bold at the bottom that made her aunt gasp out loud. It was more money than she had ever seen in one place, enough to rebuild the house, to return to school, to live without counting coins before buying food. This is the revised purchase offer for your farmland, the official said. Payment can be completed immediately upon signing. Amara stared at the paper, her expression unreadable. And if I don't sign? She asked quietly. The second man opened the briefcase and removed another document. Then the land will be considered for compulsory acquisition under development provisions, he said in a rehearsed tone. You will receive compensation, but it may not match this amount. Her aunt grabbed her arm urgently. Take it, please. This is a blessing. Neighbors murmured agreement. No one refuses money like this. You will regret it later. Amara's fingers tightened around the pages. For a moment, it seemed as though she might yield. The weight of expectation pressed from every direction. Poverty, fear, hope, survival. Then she folded the documents carefully and handed them back. My land is not for sale, she said. The courtyard went silent. The official blinked as if he had misheard. Miss, perhaps you did not understand the figure. I understood, she replied. This project has government backing. I heard you. Frustration sharpened his voice. Why refuse something that will change your life? Amara's gaze drifted past them toward the distant line of trees beyond the river, land no one else saw the way she did. Because it already changed someone else's life, she said softly. Neither man understood. Her aunt looked at her as though she had gone mad. The official slipped the papers back into the envelope with stiff movements. You may reconsider. But do not delay too long. They turned and left, the vehicle pulling away in a swirl of dust, carrying with it the stunned silence of the onlookers. Amara stood alone in the yard, heart pounding, hands trembling now that the pressure had lifted. Not from doubt. From the certainty that she had just stepped onto a path with no easy return. The journey to the city began before sunrise. Amara boarded an aging bus with cracked windows and seats patched with tape, clutching a cloth bag that held little more than water, a change of wrapper, and the wooden box from beneath her bed. The driver blasted music loud enough to rattle the metal frame as the vehicle lurched onto the highway. Villages blurred into towns, then into sprawling concrete neighborhoods, until at last the skyline rose ahead, towers of glass reflecting a sun that seemed brighter, harsher, less forgiving. By the time she stepped off at the Central Park, the air smelled different. Exhaust fumes, perfume, hot asphalt, street food, money. People moved quickly, eyes forward, as if stopping meant falling behind forever. Coal Industries headquarters dominated the boulevard. It did not simply stand there, it loomed. A massive structure of glass and polished stone, its mirrored surface swallowing the sky. Cars glided into the underground entrance without pause. Security guards in dark uniforms stood at attention like statues. Amara hesitated at the base of the wide steps. For a moment she considered turning back. Then she climbed. Inside, the temperature dropped sharply. The floor shone like water. Her sandals made soft, uncertain sounds against it. Conversations hushed as she crossed the lobby, not because she was important but because she did not belong. Receptionists glanced up, eyes flicking over her worn clothes, her size, the dust still clinging to the hem of her skirt. One guard stepped forward, palm raised. Visitors require an appointment. I need to speak to the owner, Amara said. He almost smiled. So does half the city. I came from the village about the river land. That made him pause, just long enough for uncertainty to replace dismissal. Wait there. Minutes stretched. Staff walked past, whispering just loudly enough to be heard. Is she lost? Maybe she's here to clean. Village people will enter anywhere. Amara kept her gaze forward, hands clasped to stop them from trembling. At last, a sharply dressed assistant approached, tablet in hand. You are the one refusing to sell, she said, not unkindly but not warm either. Follow me. As the elevator doors closed, Amara caught her reflection in the mirrored wall, small against the polished metal, eyes wide but unbroken. The doors opened onto another world entirely. The office was vast, almost empty of decoration, as though nothing needed to prove its value there. Behind a broad desk sat the man from the road. He did not stand when she entered. For several seconds he simply watched her, the same measured gaze but sharper now, searching rather than amused. Without the chaos of the market, his presence felt heavier, more controlled. So, he said finally, you decided to come to me. I decided to ask why you want my land, Amara replied. He leaned back slightly. We want many lands. Yours is not special. Then why not leave it alone? A faint edge entered his voice. Because it sits at the center of a project that will bring jobs, roads, development. Things your village lacks. And if we do not want them? His brow lifted. People always want progress. She shook her head slowly. People want respect first. Silence settled between them. He tapped a pen against the desk, then slid a new document forward. This is a final offer. Higher than before. Enough to ensure you never carry yam again. Amara did not even glance at it. My answer is still no. Something hardened in his expression. You are refusing opportunity out of stubbornness. I am protecting something, she said quietly. What exactly? Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. My father's land. The reaction was subtle, so small another person might have missed it. The pen stopped moving. His gaze sharpened just slightly. Your father's name? He asked. She hesitated, then said it. The silence that followed felt different from the others. Not tense. Not irritated. Focused. He looked down at the desk, then back at her, as if seeing layers that had not been visible before. You may go, he said abruptly. She frowned. That is all. For now. Amara turned and walked out, confusion mixing with relief. Behind her, he remained motionless, the name echoing in his mind like something half-remembered. Something about that name changes everything. You want to know why? Don't skip ahead, the truth is coming. Within hours, the investigation began. Not publicly. Not officially. Quiet instructions delivered to trusted staff, files requested from archives, land registries accessed, background reports compiled. At first, everything seemed ordinary. Amara, female, rural resident, limited formal education, small-scale agricultural seller. No criminal record. No political ties. No visible leverage. But deeper records told a stranger story. Ownership documents for the river land dated back decades, transferred cleanly from father to daughter. Yet earlier files, older than the company itself, showed references to partnerships that abruptly ended without explanation. Pages were missing where signatures should have been. Margins bore marks of removal, as though entire sections had been cut away. One registry entry listed a corporate agreement tied to the same location. Then stopped mid-sentence, the remainder replaced by blank space. The billionaire frowned as he reviewed the copies. Where are the rest of these records? We are still searching, an aide replied. Some archives from that period were relocated. Relocated. He disliked that word. What about the father? Very little documented after a certain year. Almost as if he disappeared from formal activity. Not died. Not retired. Disappeared. A cold thread of suspicion wound through him. He closed the file slowly, fingers resting on the page where the name appeared again. Something had been removed from history. And someone had worked very hard to make sure it stayed that way. He did not arrive with a convoy this time. No sirens. No security pushing people aside. Just one vehicle stopping quietly outside her compound as the evening light softened the edges of the village. Children playing nearby paused, curious but not afraid. Amara was washing a basin when she saw him step through the gate. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Up close, without the armor of his office or the distance of a crowd, he looked different. Not smaller, not weaker, but human in a way she had not seen before. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. She set the basin down carefully, wiping her hands on her wrapper. "You owe me many things." The honesty landed without hostility, just fact. "I spoke to you with disrespect," he continued, "and I allowed others to treat you the same." "You did more than allow it," she replied quietly. "You began it." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant sound of evening cooking fires crackling to life. "I cannot undo that day," he said. "But I am sorry." Amara studied his face, searching for mockery, pity, or calculation. She found none, only a kind of restrained regret that seemed unfamiliar even to him. "Sorry does not wash mud from memory," she said. His jaw tightened slightly, but he nodded. "I know. And it does not give back what was broken before you even arrived." Another nod. For the first time her voice softened, not forgiving but no longer sharp. "If you are here for forgiveness you may go. I do not give it on command." "I am not," he said. "I am here because I finally understand what was taken." That caught her attention. They stood facing one another in the fading light, two people separated by everything except the truth now pulling them toward the same painful center. Respect did not appear suddenly. It settled slowly like dust after a storm, fragile, tentative, but real. News travels faster than vehicles in a village. Within days, distant relatives began appearing, people Amara had not seen in years, some she barely remembered at all. They arrived with sympathetic smiles, exaggerated concern, and questions that circled inevitably back to money. "You know we are family," one uncle said, settling heavily onto a bench as though claiming it. "If compensation comes, it should benefit everyone." Another woman clasped Amara's hands dramatically. "Your father would want us to share in your good fortune." Behind them stood a local official who had once ignored her existence entirely. Now he spoke with oily politeness about cooperation and community interests. Amara listened without interrupting. When they finished, she drew a slow breath. "My father helped many people," she said. "But he did not leave this land to many people. He left it to me." The official smiled thinly. "Development requires sacrifice. I have already sacrificed enough." The uncle's tone hardened. "Do not forget where you come from." "I have not," she replied calmly. "That is why I will not allow you to turn my father's name into something cheap." Silence fell, not respectful but stunned. For years they had known her as quiet, compliant, easy to pressure. That version of her no longer existed. "If you came for money," she continued, "there is none to give. If you came for peace you are welcome to stay. But you will not take what is not yours." One by one they realized persuasion had failed. As they left, their polite smiles cracked into irritation, then resentment. Amara watched them go without relief or anger, only a steady certainty that she had crossed another invisible line and would never step back again. When he returned, he carried documents instead of apologies. They sat at a wooden table beneath the shade of a mango tree, papers spread carefully between them. Official seals, legal language, signatures waiting to be placed. "I am not asking you to sell," he said. "I am here to return what should never have been taken." She read slowly, lips moving faintly as she followed the lines. Each page confirmed something extraordinary: full legal recognition of her father's original ownership rights, protection against future seizure, and restoration of claims erased decades earlier. "This will secure the land in your name permanently," he explained. "No agency can remove you without your consent." Her hands trembled slightly, though her voice remained steady. "And why are you doing this?" "Because my company exists partly because of him. Whether anyone acknowledged it or not." She closed the file and looked at him directly. "This is not charity. No. It does not make us friends. I did not expect it to." A faint, weary smile touched her lips for the first time. "Good." He hesitated, then added, "There will also be a public statement. Your father's role will be recognized formally." Amara considered that longer than the documents themselves. "Not for your reputation," she said at last. "Not to ease your conscience. It must be done because it is true. It will be." She extended her hand across the table, not in gratitude, not in surrender, but in agreement between equals. He took it. For a brief second, Both understood that this moment mattered more than any contract. The ceremony drew people from every surrounding community. A stage had been erected near the river, decorated not with extravagant displays but with simple banners bearing a name many had not heard spoken with respect in years. Elders sat in front rows. Officials hovered at the edges. Curious villagers filled every available space. Amara stood to one side, wearing her cleanest wrapper, posture straight, expression calm. The billionaire stepped forward to the microphone. For once, there was no polished speech about growth or success. "My company," he began, voice steady, "benefited from work done long before I was born. Work that was never properly acknowledged." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. He continued, naming her father clearly, recounting the partnership, the land contributions, the vision that had helped build an empire others later claimed as their own. Gasps broke out. Heads turned toward Amara. "This land," he said, gesturing toward the fields, "was never ours to take. Today we correct that." He signed the final document on the table before him, then stepped aside. Amara walked forward slowly. For a moment she simply looked out at the crowd, neighbors who had pitied her, mocked her, ignored her. Now their faces held something entirely different: astonishment, respect, a touch of shame. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She only signed her name with a steady hand and lifted her head. Not triumphant. Peaceful. As if a weight carried for years had finally been set down. If this moment gave you goosebumps, subscribe now. Stories like this remind us that dignity always outlives humiliation. Change did not come overnight. But it came. Within months, construction began on a modest agricultural training center built on the edge of the restored farmland. Not a factory. Not a takeover. A place where farmers could learn improved methods, store crops safely, and negotiate fair prices without middlemen swallowing the profit. A sign at the entrance bore her father's name, carved into wood that would weather slowly rather than gleam briefly. Villagers who had once struggled now found steady work. Young people who might have left for the city stayed to build something at home. School programs followed, teaching children not just how to farm, but how to manage land so it would sustain future generations. Amara walked through the fields often, not as a laborer forced by necessity, but as a guardian of something larger than herself. The billionaire visited occasionally, never with ceremony, never staying long. Each time he seemed quieter, less driven by the need to command, more willing to listen. The land no longer symbolized loss. It had become proof that truth, once planted, could still grow. On a bright morning nearly a year later, Amara stood at her roadside stall again. Not because she had to, because she wanted to. The yams were arranged neatly, her movements unhurried, her shoulders relaxed in a way they had never been before. Customers approached with respect now, not curiosity or mockery. Some greeted her by name. Others thanked her for what the foundation had brought to the region. Across the road, a familiar vehicle slowed briefly before continuing on its way. She did not wave. He did not stop. There was no need. Whatever needed to be said between them had already been spoken. She lifted a yam, testing its weight with practiced ease. For the first time in years, the future did not feel like something pressing down on her. It felt open. People often believed wealth created power. But power, she had learned, came from knowing who you were, and refusing to let anyone else rewrite that truth. Her father's voice seemed to echo faintly in her memory. "Stand straight, even when you are alone." She smiled softly, not sad, not triumphant, simply at peace. Respect is not given by wealth. It is revealed by truth. If this story touched you, share where you're watching from in the comments. Your voice matters here. And if you believe that dignity should never depend on status, stay with this channel. More stories like this are waiting.